Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1. The Joys of Googly Eyes in Space. Written by Marilyn of Many. Tentacle aliens are fun to surprise. They flail about in a way that's more endearing than it should be. Not that I would ever try to prompt that kind of reaction on purpose. Oh no. Just kidding. I absolutely would. But that was hidden under your head fur all this time, Floyd demanded, pointing a tentacle at my head and waving the others like a tail of a demented kite. How was that not pun the briefing? I was laughing too much to keep it up. They're not real, I admitted, plucking the googly eyes from my hair. Humans don't really have eyes on the back of their heads. It's just a saying, see? I held them out in my palm, then after he'd stared at them for a silent moment, I stuck them on a console that I'd been using, right above the ID scanner, where the next person was certain to see them. Floyd was thinking hard, his brow ridges scowling in his octopus-like face. The tentacles did the bulk of the body language, twining around each other, preoccupied. I have a use for your false eyes, he declared. Would you be willing to wear them again? Unnecessary question, I'm sure. Sure I will, I agreed. I've got more with fresh adhesive. What's the story? Lloyd's tentacles curved in a way that resembled humans' arms with fists on hips. Indignant, he was still frowning. Someone has been taking food from the stasis chamber that is clearly labeled as belonging to another, he said. I have a theory who is doing this, but I haven't been able to prove it. I am in, I said, with a broad smile. Thwarting lunch thieves is a time-honored tradition amongst my people. Do you want some disturbing human spices to put in the food? No, Maybe? He said, reconsidering. If the first plan doesn't work, I think humiliation would be enough for a deterrent. The offer stands, so tell me about this plan. Floyd made an announcement to his unit before lunchtime, with me standing behind him like an exotic tall creature I was. He told them all that the thefts would not stand. The room where meals were kept would be guarded today by the human, who was supplied with a collection of fluorescent dive bombs. These were meant for outside repairs in particular dark parts of space. They made fine projectiles in the hands of a species known for their throwing agility. The rest of the group mumbled their agreement with a range of expressions. Most of them were the same species as Floyd, with the same anxious tentacle movements, while a couple were a subspecies that looked more like squids than octopus, and several were mantis-like bug aliens rounded out the group. As far as I could tell, most of them approved of this plan, though a few were skeptical. Announcement over, Floyd ushered them all back to work and me into the break room. My hair was still braided, as usual, and I hadn't applied the googly eyes yet. I did this now, as Floyd made sure no one was looking. Then I set up my basket of fist-sized dive bombs, and the tablet of my own work that I would be preoccupied with, and waved a conspiratorial goodbye to Floyd. Refrigeration units and heat stasis chambers lined the walls. I could face all directions at once, but I didn't need to. I sat in the central table, with my back towards the chamber where Floyd kept his lunch, and I unbraided my hair, draped it over my shoulders, and sat in such a way that the eyes would be nicely visible from behind me, but not from the door. Then I waited. The diagrams and documents on the tablet were engaging enough that I didn't mind the time passing, but not so much that I didn't notice that someone slipped to the door quietly. I held still, facing forwards but straining my peripheral vision. It looked like one of the squiggly fellows, an exceptionally pointed head specimen that I'd previously dubbed Kraken Craig. He had a proper name, but I couldn't remember it, and it probably wasn't as familiar to an Earth name as Floyd's tentacle alien name was. At any rate, Craig was being deliberately sneaky. He crept towards the stasis chambers, likely heading directly for Floyd's, just out of spite. I tilted my head, waiting for him to look. He made the funniest noise when he saw it, a gasp blob and a thwap of tentacles flailing against the chamber in surprise. I casually picked up a dive bomb and rolled it around in my hand. Craig scuttled for the exit, tentacles smacking the door, all stealth abandoned. He was met outside by Floyd and several others holding cameras. "Surprise!" Floyd announced. "I knew that it was you." As the lunch thief tried to bluster his way out of this, I pegged him with a dive bomb in the back of the head. The poof of color made the crowd edge away, laughing. Craig whirled to glare at me. I blocked the eyes off the back of my head and held them up with the best innocent smile. That led to an unprofessional swear from Craig and approval from the crowd. Floyd was still recording as Craig stormed off, trailing neon green that I'd probably have to clean up. Worth it. "Can I have a copy of that video?" I asked Floyd. "I have some friends back home who would love to see it." "Absolutely," Floyd said. "I'll offer you some of my lunch. I brought extra, and I believe it's edible by your species. As long as you don't mind me covering it in spices," I laughed. "Thank you. Maybe I can convince you to just try a dash of salt. Isn't that the one that's just powdered minerals? I can't believe your people eat rocks." To be fair, they're very, very tasty rocks. End of story. Story number 2. Not a Great Plan. Written by Echoing Cascade. Officer Thompson was not having a great morning. His hair hurt. His stomach felt like it was filled with bricks, and his head was far too small for his brain. "I must have drunk a bit too much last night." He looked around to figure out where he was. A small motel room consisting of little more than a bed and a bathroom. The latter he urgently needed to use. As he jumped out of bed, he found that he was handcuffed by his left hand to the bedpost. I either had a really crappy night or a really great one. As he looked at where the cuff was secured to the bed, he heard a small female groan of pain from inside the covers. "I guess things are looking up." A small drip of blue blood started to pool by the woman's side of the bed. "Let's not jump to conclusions just yet." Before he could ask if she was okay, the unseen woman under the covers exploded into so many chunks of green flesh. "Okay, maybe that's normal for her species?" A voice resounded in the room. "Hello, Mr. Thompson. I would like to play a game. And now it's time for a wishful optimism is over. I have injected you with a time-delayed poison that will result in rather explosive death. If you want to survive, you will have to ingest your unlucky conquest flesh. It will act as a, Wait, what the frack?" The unseen voice stopped talking as Thompson began to eat the chunks with gusto. As a former field medic for the 142nd Terran Mobile Infantry, he had seen far more terrible sights, and as an amateur of British cuisine, he had eaten much, much worse. After eating his fill, he started to tie a tourniquet around his left arm. "So, do I get a sore, or, do I just chew through the wrist?" Captain Erskine and the other Carnage soldiers and the Matriarch's Pride Special Unit, the unit Thompson had recently joined, had been watching the scene via cameras from the room next door. They looked at each other in shocked confusion, the mandibles cracking in distress. The captain still held the microphone in his claw. "Captain, we might want to rethink the whole hazing the rookie Deathworlder idea." End of story. Story number 3. Don't underestimate them. Written by Traumatized Waffle. Drac sat on a bar stool, downed a shot of Yorian whiskey, and eyed the human that had just walked into the bar. The first thing of note was that the human was wearing no armor to speak of. He wore a strangely colored short-sleeved button-up shirt, with suspenders attached to a pair of denim jeans, along with a pair of rough-looking boots. There was also the face covering, which Drac was pretty sure the humans called a bandana, and a strange hat called a cowboy hat. Compared to Drac's nanocomposite armor vest, it may as well have been made of paper. Drac eyed the weapon situated in the holster attached to the human's belt. It appeared to be made of some type of crude metal, likely iron. It also appeared to be a mechanical nature. requiring physical ammunition as evidenced by the small cartridges attached to the human's belt. Finally, Drac spoke up. "Hey, human! You look a little lost. Your kind typically knows to stay away from here," Drac called out as he stood from his bar stool. There were a few scattered chuckles throughout the bar as people began to take notice of the unfolding situation. The human turned his head in Drac's direction and began to look the large Urian up and down. "Them's be fighting words, sir. Fancy backing them up," spoke back the human, eyeing Drac squarely. Drac let out a loud chuckle. "Hear that, everyone? This little shrimp wants me to back up my words," announced Drac. Some folks laughed, and others began to talk amongst themselves. "What did you have in mind, human?" sneered Drac, pointing a finger at the human's direction. The human inclined his head against the gesture to the energy pistol attached to Drac's belt. "You got a pistol, I got a pistol. Let's have ourselves a good old-fashioned duel," suggested the human. A duel. Drac had, of course, heard of the concept before. Two humans would stand apart from each other and swiftly draw their weapon and fire. Whoever was faster was the winner. However, Drac had never been in a duel before. After sizing up his opponent once more, Drac figured that he could win. "All right, human, I accept," answered Drac. The two walked towards each other and met in the center of the bar. "Here is what we're going to do. We're going to turn so our backs face. Then we take 10 steps forward. Then we'll turn, draw, and fire. Sound fair?" explained the human. I accept these terms," agreed Drac, turning so that his back would face the humans. The human did the same, and for a moment both were still. Then, at the same time, both took their first steps forward. Then a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. It wasn't until about the 8th step that Drac remembered something else about dueling. The humans that had pioneered the practice did so back in humanity's more primitive days. Those duelers were known as cowboys and carried slug-thrower weapons called six-shooters. Drac began to sweat. This human had dressed exactly as a cowboy. 9th step. Drac relaxed a little, clinging to the thought that perhaps the human knew about the legendary duelers as well, and had only dressed as one as a deterrent towards would-be challengers. 10th step. As Drac swung around, he realized that the thoughts he had been clinging to had just been more of a desperate hope. He wasn't even turned around all the way, and he could see the human already raising his weapon. Time seemed to slow. The human leveled the weapon, and there was a loud bang. Drac's lifeless body fell to the floor. The metal slug from the human's weapon had struck him right between the eyes. The human brought the barrel of the weapon up to his mouth and blew away the smoke that was rising from the barrel. He twirled the weapon in his hand by the trigger guard and cleanly slid it back into its holster. Everyone in the bar was still silent, watching as the human paced over to the bar and sat down. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Parky, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.